BBC WM. The top story tonight, the future of Cannock Hospital, due to be discussed at a public meeting this evening. At the end of the year, the hospital will be £10 million in the red. Only 2 of its 9 wards are currently open, and tonight will be the first time when the public have had the chance to hear directly from the trust who run the hospital. The Conservative MP for Cannock Chase, Aidan Burley, is going to be at the meeting, which starts at 7 o'clock. He joins me right now on BBC WM. Aidan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Just explain to everybody why Cannock Hospital is in such a bad state.
Well, Cannock Hospital forms part of the Mid Staffordshire Foundation Trust, which is the NHS trust that looks after both Cannock Hospital and Stafford Hospital. And people will be aware of the historic problems at Stafford Hospital, but actually there's a more serious problem, which is that financially the trust is bankrupt. It made a £20 million loss last financial year, and it's predicted to lose a £15 million loss this year. And that is why Monitor, the independent regulator of Foundation Trust, have been called in by the government to look at the finances and to make the trust solvent by next March. And as part of that review, they are looking into the futures of both Stafford and Cannock Hospitals and looking for ways to close the deficit.
Could Cannock Hospital be closed permanently?
I think that has got to be a possibility. My understanding from the latest figures from the trust itself is that Cannock runs at a loss of £3 to £4 million per year, and Stafford runs at a loss of £8 or £9 million per year. And bluntly, if it was an ordinary business in the private sector, you can't have a £15 million loss year on year and carry on being a going concern. So, the trust needs to work out a way to become solvent again. And if you look at the 2 hospitals, Stafford is the big acute that I think would be impossible to close, whereas Cannock is the smaller brother of the 2. It's a small community hospital that's only being half used by the trust at the moment, and that is the one that would appear to be under threat. People
in Cannock must be upset, angry, frustrated. And what can you say to them tonight to help?
Well, this is not my meeting tonight.
No.
This is the trust's meeting, and it's up to the people of Cannock to say to the trust, that they will not accept our local community hospital being closed, essentially to solve the financial problems that are, the responsibility of the management of the trust, and to solve a lot of the problems historically of Stafford Hospital. There have been no complaints that I've had since being an MP about the medical care at Cannock. However, the fact remains that the hospital is very underutilised. It's only about 50% used. There are only 2 wards currently open out of a possibility of 9. And anybody knows that, you can't go on with such an underutilised public asset. And it's up for the trust, I think, to listen to residents' concern and to come up with a plan to make it fully utilised and to secure its future for the future.
But the current climate of cuts in the NHS surely isn't going to help, and these are coalition cuts.
Well, ironically, the reverse is true. The government has put in an extra £58 million into Mid-Staff's Foundation Trust. So far from cutting it, they've actually been pouring money in. But Monitor has now had to come in because the Foundation Trust keeps on losing so much money every year, and it has to work with them between now and March to come up with a way of making them financially solvent.
So before that money was put in, Aidan, that 50 million plus, were there not checks and balances done on the trust? Because clearly it's been mismanaged.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and frankly, I have always been astonished at how Mid-Staff's NHS Trust, as it was then, was given foundation status by the last Labour government, with Andy Burnham as the Health Secretary signing it off. One of the key criteria to become a foundation trust is you have to prove that you can balance your books. How on earth it was ever given foundation trust status and then ran at 20 million losses every year on year on year is beyond me. But the reality is now Cannock is the hospital that's in the spotlight. That Cannock is the one that they could potentially sell off, use the money to pay down the deficit and decant the service to Stafford. And the message from Cannock this evening is very clear. We will not accept our community hospital being closed to solve the problems of the trust. The trust need to work out a way to become solvent without closing our hospital.
There was talk last month that the hospital could be turned into a not-for-profit company owned by the public, and you backed that proposal. What's the state of play with that?
Well, this is my suggestion as a last resort, which is that if the trust simply cannot manage the hospital as a going concern, and Monitor recommend its closure to balance the books. In that scenario, my suggestion is that rather than the hospital being closed, the government should give it for free to the community in the form of a community interest company or a not-for-profit vehicle that would be managed locally. And in that scenario, what the community would manage the bricks and mortar, the NHS would continue to use the part of the hospital they need, the 40 or 50% they currently use, and pay rent for using that space and continue to provide NHS services and an NHS hospital in that part of the building. However, the community could then rent out the other space in the hospital that is currently sitting completely empty, still costing money for the heating and the lighting and the rates and everything else, and it could rent that space out to other public sector providers or to other healthcare services such as GPs or sports therapy, or even have a pharmacy, so that actually, we can run the building and make sure that it's not closed. That to me is better than it being recommended for closure, but that is an absolute last resort, and it's up to the Trust and Monitor between now and then to come up with their plan so that we don't have to do that.
Conservative MP for Cannock Chase, Aidan Burley, who's going to be attending this meeting tonight, starts at 7 o'clock. Aidan, thanks for joining us.